we're going to switch gears and talk about energy storage. And I think this is a fun one to end on. It's obviously quite different than our last topic, but it leans right into things on the brink here. So if I think about energy security, I'll argue that the ability to store energy is king. It's the tip of the spear. If you look at reasons wars have been fought and how economies have built around over the last 100 years, much of that's been built around oil and how to access it, how to maintain it, how to use the funds from it to fund other activities, both economic and militaristic. The ability to have access to that oil has been a key component of national security and economic security. As we look for the next 100 years, that's switching, and that's switching as we think about a cleaner economy, moving off of a hydrocarbon-based economy. But we still need the ability to take energy where we want it, when we want it, to save it for a rainy day, to store it, to deploy it where we need to. And that is now going to come in the form of batteries. Now, I don't think I need to spend a lot of scene set time. I typically do, but I don't need to here. We know the answer. China owns us on batteries right now. They own every bit of it, the supply chain, the manufacturing, the deployment, and they're going further and further downstream and starting to put this and to start really threatening even the global automotive industry. So as we look at the outcomes of having this sort of control over the supply chain, this is not sort of a theoretical in the future of what they're going to do. We're starting to see the impacts of this right now, starting to flex those muscles around sort of that total ownership of the supply chain. So in October, they started to put export controls on graphite. So graphite is in every single battery for any high energy density use case in the world right now. They own 99% of the supply chain. And if you look at how this was done, this was not a tariff. That's a very blunt force tool. This was a export permits, which means they can get to decide exactly who gets access to it, who doesn't get access to it, and why they get access to it. If you look at the year 2023, there's two types of batteries that really drive any high performance application. So think anything that moves. Vehicles, defense, munitions, consumer electronics. It's LFP batteries and NMC batteries. So nickel, manganese, cobalt owns about 60% of the market. Lithium phosphate batteries own about 40% of the iron phosphate, own about 40% of the market. So they are the two predominant batteries that are out there. Last year, China produced 2 times the number of LFP batteries than the world required, entirely driving down and plummeting the price of those batteries in the market. Happened to coincide very, very closely as we were trying to go build capacity in the US to start to produce those batteries. And many of those projects are now being shut down or slowed down because they are wildly uneconomic as prices have dropped well below the fundamentals. And even for ourselves, we made a big announcement last year, and we'll talk about what we're doing here at Lyten, that announced that we had received very large investment from multiple auto manufacturers, from multiple Fortune 500 companies to bring our batteries to the market. And within a couple months, we were securing some of our lithium supply from China, and surprisingly, we were no longer allowed to secure our supply from China. Could not find a single producer there that would sell it to us anymore. So they're taking actions using the monopoly that they've built. They've built that monopoly over a very sophisticated, multi-decade industrial strategy, investment strategy. You have to give credit where credit is due on this. And now they're wielding that power. So we know that we're taking a number of actions here, and with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the infrastructure bill, the amount of capacity that we're looking to build to be able to manufacture batteries in the US is staggering. So it's a 5x growth in terms of what's the committed amount of gigafactories that are scheduled to be built in the US. In Europe, it's a 37x growth. Now, they started from a smaller base. But it is an enormous growth. There's a problem with this, though. Almost every one of these factories is building NMC batteries or LFP batteries. China owns the entire input into that stream. All we're building is the cell making down at the bottom, but all the cathodes, all the anodes, all the materials are still coming from that same location. So we actually are solidifying their supply chain here by trying to build these factories. The So if you look at this strategy, I'd like to propose a potentially different approach that we take here. If we look at sort of the art of war from 2,500 years ago, it basically says, don't walk into a monopoly and try to beat them on their playing field. They have the advantage here. We have to find new ground and different ground to compete here. And so I'd like to propose an alternative to what has been mostly a replication strategy. And that's necessary to start to build our capacity, start to build our capability to manufacture, but is not going to get us over the line into a strategy that is, in fact, trying to eliminate the critical minerals that are actually driving their power in the market. So I'm going to talk to you about lithium-sulfur batteries. This is what Lyten is bringing into the market. We're one of about probably 20 or 30 companies that are bringing this technology forward right now. So a lithium-sulfur battery sits at about, is working towards about 2 times the energy density of a lithium-ion battery. So think about a battery that's over half the weight, reduces the weight by over half of a current battery today. It's made up of 3 components. It's made up of sulfur. Sulfur is abundantly available everywhere in the world. It's also comically cheap. When we go around and try to go get sulfur when we were building out our first facility, we'd stop and ask for samples, and guys would walk out with 50-pound bags and throw it in the back of our car. And we asked, so how much does it cost? And they're like, yeah, just take it. It's incredibly cheap input material. Our 3-dimensional graphene, which is actually a material we make that actually comes from methane or natural gas, again, abundantly available in every city, town, country in the world. And then lithium metal. Lithium metal is still one that is a challenge, but also if we look at the key minerals, it is one that is widely distributed. And as we develop the technology to access this from brines, this is actually an area that we have a lot of advantage and expertise from the 100-plus-year oil gas industry. It's a lot of the same technology to get these brines out of the ground and extract the lithium out. So what you don't see here is nickel, cobalt, manganese, graphite. So none of these materials are required in a lithium-sulfur battery. So this is a battery that has been known for decades. It's been on the Department of Energy's roadmap. And these are now just starting to come forward and starting to enter the market. So we actually have a facility built in San Jose, California. It's actually the world's first lithium-sulfur manufacturing facility. And it came online in May last year. We're still a few years away from being ready for an electric vehicle. We still have some cycle life improvements we need to make on the battery. But later this year, we actually will be delivering commercial cells for the Department of Defense, for satellites, for drones, for personal use wearables applications. And actually, just last week, we started delivering samples to 5 of the 10 largest electric vehicle manufacturers in the world. So these batteries are coming, and they're coming forward. And they are a game change in terms of the supply chain. In terms of critical minerals. So what I've heard today continues to be a lot of talk which is very similar to what we hear when we go really talk all over the country and talk in the government, and is a lot around replicating supply chains, doing and trying to build up what China's built over the last 2 decades and what they've invested in. What I'd like to ask is that we start to think about an entirely different way to go solve this. So what you're going to see, and hopefully you'll see a lot more of us coming, in the coming months, is a lithium-sulfur battery. Look out for it. It's 2 times the energy density. It eliminates nickel, cobalt, manganese, graphite. Still has lithium. We're still working on that one. It will. Almost every high-energy density battery in the world still needs that element. Right now, we are not quite at 100% local supply chain, but we are working very close to it. And so we are building out a North American supply chain to fulfill all of the input materials. We're also starting to build a European supply chain, and have started to, as we will be quickly after we build manufacturing in the US, we're already starting to site locations to build manufacturing in Europe for the European Union. And the nice thing about all this is, I think it's been said a bunch of times, nobody pays for green premium. Nobody pays for a better supply chain. There's no premium that will be paid. You've got to compete on the prices that are in the market today, which means you've got to compete on the prices that China can bring things in the market. When you have I mentioned ridiculously comically cheap input materials, that means we have a bill of materials that's less than half that of a typical battery. So we can actually enter the market right off the bat at a cost competitive basis. And maybe the last piece, and it's the least sexy piece of the whole thing of talking about a new battery chemistry, but actually it's probably the most impactful, is that this battery gets manufactured on the exact same equipment in the exact same lines that a lithium-ion battery gets produced on today. In fact, we purposely built our facility that we built it as a lithium-ion facility, and then we converted it to lithium sulfur to prove how easy it would be, and we were able to do that in a few weeks and 2% of the capital cost. And so now, if we look at these huge growth of facilities that are getting built, our prediction is that many of these are going to struggle to get built because it's going to be uneconomic to bring NMC and LFP batteries into the market, because when somebody owns the supply chain, they have lots of levers to pull to make that uneconomic. And what we're offering is that we're starting to work with multiple auto OEMs who have some of these facilities to suggest how do we actually convert those over to lithium sulfur, because it's so low cost to do it. And now you get a battery supply chain that is localized, and you don't have to waste the capital that's already been deployed. So we're at the front end of starting to bring this into the market. I think you'll hear more about it as we go. To the folks in policy, in Department of Defense, Department of Energy, I'll leave with just this one comment, which is, as we go in and talk about this solution, we often get working with the technical teams who are experts on batteries and say, well, that's higher risk than NMC batteries. I'd like you guys to work on this more, and when you've gotten to a stage similar to NMC, then let's come back and let's talk about that. What I offer up is, I agree, it is higher risk. It's a new technology, but that pales in comparison to the risk of trying to replicate a technology and a supply chain that's been built with a 20-year head start and a very well orchestrated industrial policy at a country level. That has its own risks with it. And what we would really love the support as we think about this is, how do we marry technical risk with business risk and supply chain risk, so we can start to really support some of these technologies as we go to build up our first gigafactory, which we're designing and plan to be building in Nevada and breaking ground here in the next 12 months. And there's more of us coming behind who are also bringing this technology forward. And this is a space where we would love the support for all of our competitors in this space, because it helps all of us go forward. Thank you.